The following program features the opinions of the host. Listeners are encouraged to seek their own understanding.
The general consensus of historians and scholars when it comes to myths and legends is that these are attempts to explain the creation of the world and certain events around them. But what if these were historical accounts of actual events, handed down through oral tradition until they were eventually written down? In many of these myths, there are tales of gods mating with humans and having offspring. That's in the Bible too, and we call those offspring the Nephilim. Welcome to the Ghost in You podcast, a podcast about the weird, the wonderful, and the terrifying in the Bible. I'm Diane Student, your guide and host on this strange journey through the Bible. Episode 4, Nephilim. Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4. Now it came about, when mankind began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of mankind, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. There's a lot to unpack in this passage. Nephilim is an unusual word, and doesn't show up in all translations of the Bible, but I believe when it does, it is because we don't really have a word in English that translates it perfectly. The Nephilim that I've been using is spelled Nephilim. Nephilim, Nephilim, is a Hebrew word. The Greeks translated it as gigante in the Septuagint. English Bibles translate Nephilim as giant. So all three of these words literally mean giant. And these people were definitely very tall. But I believe that they were more than just tall. I believe that the Nephilim were demigods. The last verse seems to affirm that, as it describes them as the mighty men of old, men of renown. When I was growing up in the church, and this was the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, I never recall hearing anything about the Nephilim. Mainstream churches generally explain this passage in Genesis 6 in this way. The daughters of man were Cain's daughters, and the sons of God were Seth's sons. This goes back to Adam and Eve, who had Cain and Abel as their first kids. And you might be familiar with the story that Cain killed Abel. Adam and Eve then had Seth. Since Cain was driven out of Eden and cursed for his sin of murder, it was thought that his progeny were evil and sinful, while Seth's would be pure. Does this make any common sense? One of the key teachings in the Bible is that all people are sinful and in need of a savior, so that would include Seth and his kids. And we also know that just because a parent is a murderer, it doesn't mean their children will follow suit or be completely evil people. So the easy way that most churches brush this passage off is just wrong. And if one brushes off this passage, a deep underlying struggle that runs throughout the Bible and our world today is completely missed. The idea that we have a centuries-old battle over DNA and purity is completely missed if we just simply believe that all of Cain's kids were from the wrong side of the tracks, while Seth's were pure as the driven snow. But St. Augustine and other early church leaders and scholars of his time started pushing forward this Sethite interpretation. While the belief that the term sons of God means angels dates back to ancient Judaism and the early church, believing that meaning today is considered controversial, but it shouldn't be because the original text is clear. The Hebrew term for sons of God is B'nai Elohim, and it is only ever used to describe angels. And B'nai Elohim is used in Genesis 6. So while there are those who think it is impossible for an angel to procreate with a human, it seems that that is exactly what happened here. We have celestial, terrestrial intermarriage. We'll talk about angels in future episodes, but I think most people recognize that angels can take on human forms and eat and drink, so why couldn't they have sex too? I like to let the Bible interpret the Bible, and it's clear to me what happened here. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 through 10 says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority." This verse is clearly talking about sexual immorality. There's also Jude 6 and 7, "And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he is kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire." Clearly, some kind of sexual sin happened here, with angels leaving their natural positions. And on a side note, Sodom and Gomorrah came up in both these passages. Homosexuals are beat over the head with Sodom and Gomorrah, as many in the church use what happened there to judge them. That's even what sodomy laws have been named for. Some focus on the fact that the men of Sodom wanted to sleep with the male visitors, but completely pass over the fact that the male visitors were angels, and that is why they were strange flesh. Believing that the sons of God were fallen angels who procreated with human women puts us in good company with the likes of Origen and Justin Martyr. Martyr writes in his second apology to the Roman Senate in the 5th chapter about how the angels transgressed. It reads, "But if this idea take possession of someone, that if we acknowledge God as our helper, we should not, as we say, be oppressed and persecuted by the wicked, this too I will solve. God, when he had made the whole world, and subjected things earthly to man, and arranged the heavenly elements for the increase of fruits and rotation of the seasons, and appointed this divine law, for these things also he evidently made for man, committed the care of men and of all things under heaven to angels, whom he appointed over them. But the angels transgressed this appointment, and were captivated by love of women, and begot children, who are those that are called demons. And besides, they afterwards subdued the human race to themselves, partly by magical writings, and partly by fears and the punishments they occasioned, and partly by teaching them to offer sacrifices and incense and libations, of which things they stood in need after they were enslaved by lustful passions. And among men they sowed murders, wars, adulteries, intemperate deeds, and all wickedness. Whence all the poets and mythologists, not knowing that it was the angels and those demons who had been begotten by them, that did these things to men and women and cities and nations, which they related, ascribed them to God himself, and to those who were accounted to be his very offspring, and to the offspring of those who were called his brothers, Neptune and Pluto, and to the children again of these their offspring. For whatever name each of the angels had given to himself and his children, by that name they called them." Reading the names Neptune and Pluto here causes us to look at mythology, and clearly there are many stories of gods having children with humans. This is where Hercules comes from. I believe that these gods were real, and I think their children were real, and that they were demigods. The Nephilim were the children of the gods, or as we call them in Christianity, sons of God. These were the Titans and the Olympians, or what we would call fallen angels. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors. In Greek mythology, the Titans were the children of Uranus and Gaia, with Uranus representing heaven and Gaia representing earth. Their children went by the names Cronus, Rhea, Mnemosyne, Themis, Crius, Thea, Coeus, Phoebe, Thea, and Iapetus. Cronus eventually overthrows Uranus, and then Cronus' son Zeus overthrows him. The Titans are done, and then we have the Olympians. It would be interesting to have the angelic names to go with the mythological names. For example, it is generally thought that Enki, who was a Sumerian god of water, was the counterpart to the Roman god Neptune and the Greek god Poseidon. Could Enki have been the angelic name, since Sumer is thought to be the beginning of human culture and writing? I don't know, but it's an interesting thought. Another passage that uses the term Nephilim is found in Numbers. In Numbers 13, God told Moses to send spies into Canaan because he wanted the Israelites to set up camp there. Now, I'm not sure why God told Moses to do this, because clearly he knew what was going on in Canaan. But maybe he knew that they needed to see who was there for themselves and to test them for their bravery. Numbers 13, verses 25 to 33 reads, "At the end of 40 days they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, 'We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan.' But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, 'Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it.' Then the men who had gone up with him said, 'We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are.' So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, 'The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them.'" By the way, Caleb is one of my favorite people in the Bible. He wasn't afraid of anything, and he was always faithful. He doesn't get as much attention as other biblical figures, but he should. The description of the giants is very specific. I remember hearing the story of David and Goliath for the first time when I was a kid, and I pictured in my mind David standing around 5 feet as a teenager, and perhaps Goliath was 7 feet tall, maybe 8. Even pictures that I saw seemed to depict Goliath as a tall man, but not as tall as he more than likely was. The spies claim that they were like grasshoppers compared to the Nephilim. How tall must that be if a human is a grasshopper size? We can be guaranteed that they were at least somewhere around 14 feet tall, because another giant in the Bible was King Og of Bashan, and his bed is described in Deuteronomy 3:11 as, quote, 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit, end quote, meaning that it was nearly 14 feet in length. King Og was said to be the last of his kind, and one must wonder if the Nephilim got shorter and shorter as there was more mixing of the DNA, so how tall must have they originally been? These chapters in Numbers and Deuteronomy back up that strange line in Genesis 6. Verse 4 states, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward." And this is speaking of the time of the Great Flood. The afterward part refers to all these groups that lived in the area. Many of them included giants or Nephilim in their groups. So not all Canaanites were Nephilim, but there were many among them. These family groups ended their names with Ite. There were 193 of these groups. Ite means descendant of. There were the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Edomites, and probably the most well-known, the Canaanites. There were also the Israelites. The Israelites were special because they were set aside for God. He took them to himself and pretty much rejected all the rest. The Nephilim also include the family groups ending with I-M, and that's pronounced Im. These included the Anakim, the Emim, the Raphaim, and the Zamzumim. These groups were corrupted. Their seed was defiled. And that's why God always commanded the Israelites to destroy the other Ites and Ems. And why would a loving God command the Israelites to completely destroy the otherites, including the women, children, and animals? Because the seed was corrupted. Human and angel DNA is not supposed to mix. I've wondered, when these Nephilim die, what happens to their souls? Are they redeemable? Justin Martyr clearly had his thoughts on this, and I imagine it was the consensus of the early church fathers. In that chapter from Martyr, he twice calls the progeny of the angel and human unions demons. And clearly Martyr had also read the book of Enoch. 1 Enoch, chapter 15, verses 8 to 12 states, "And now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. As for the spirits of heaven, in heaven shall be their dwelling. But as for the spirits of the earth which were born upon the earth, on the earth shall be their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men, and against the women, because they have proceeded from them." So that is why it seems that demons so hate human beings. That's why they're always attacking them. And I have often thought that the reason a demon wants to possess a human body is not only so it can feel what it's like to be human again, but as I said there, they take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst. They have an insatiable thirst. They are so dry. And a human body is 90% water? So they want to be in that kind of a vessel so that they won't thirst so much. And that is what I believe demons are, the irredeemable spirits of the Nephilim. And God needed to completely wipe out this demon seed because the ultimate goal of the fallen ones was to corrupt the DNA right down to Jesus. He couldn't be perfect if his DNA was corrupted. That struggle is throughout the Bible. And even though they didn't succeed, they are still up to something today. Perhaps that is what all those alien abductions are about. What are the fallen ones trying to create? Or worse, what might they have already created? The word Nephilim is unique for a reason. Whatever these were, they were like nothing else. What do you think they were? The ghost in you knows. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. May God bless you and keep you. This has been a production of History Goes Bump.